Good morning, I'm Gerg Cahiles sitting in for Maiki Oreta, and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. The headlines. Economic Secretary Arsenio Balisacan believes the Philippines may see modest growth under the new tariff structure of the Trump administration. Car sales are picking up speed in the first quarter of this year with over 117,000 units sold. U.S. President Donald Trump plans to impose tariffs on imported pharmaceuticals soon. And the Philippine Armed Forces welcome the inclusion of the West Philippine Sea in Google Maps. First, let's take a look at how financial markets performed on Monday. All three major indices ended on positive territory on Monday as investors rallied on President Donald Trump's exemption for tariffs on smartphones, computers, as well as various electronics imported from China. This comes after a choppy trading day since Trump announced sweeping tariffs on April 2, with investors seeing some of the biggest swing in indices in years amid worries that a global trade war will push the economy into recession.
What the president said over the weekend is that certain technology companies, specifically chip companies, pharmaceuticals, will not be subject to the broader retaliatory tariffs with China. They will be subject to the fentanyl tariffs, but other than that, they are not going to be subject to the 125% tariff, reciprocal tariff against China, which is very advantageous.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.78%. The S&P 500 gained 0.79%, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq inched up by 0.64%. Over in Europe, stocks also rose. The UK's FTSE 100 gained 2.14%, Germany's DAX inched up by 2.85%, and France's CAC 40 rose 2.37%. The Philippines may see modest growth in exports and economy under the new tariff structure of the Trump administration. National Economic and Development Authority Secretary Arsenio Balisacan says the shift to a uniform tariff system offers more favorable benefits for the Philippines. Balisacan explains the country's exports may inch up by 1.5% due to stronger competitiveness not just in the U.S., but in other countries as well. He noted that the impact of the tariffs on the Philippine gross domestic product remains positive but minimal to less than 1%. The Philippines is now under a flat 10% tariff rate from previous 17% rate. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP may be forced to ease the monetary policy more aggressively to support economic activity. Fitch Solutions Unit BMI explains this is if the United States implements a 17% tariff to the Philippines under the 90-day universal 10% rate. Despite this, the BMI maintains its forecast of 50 basis points rate cut in 2025 as it projected that the BSP will ease the monetary policy by 25 basis points on June 19. This is amid slower inflation rate which stood at 1.8% last month. Central bank services are now at your fingertips as Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas formally launches its mobile application. With the BSP mobile app, users can access real-time financial data, policy decisions, and economic indicators. Users can also receive daily exchange rates through a push notification, and this can be filtered to choose the preferred currencies. Another feature is the BSP Online Buddy or Bob, a chatbot available 24/7 that allows users to submit complaints, ask questions, and even upload supporting documents. Deputy Governor Bernadette Romulo Puyat said the BSP mobile app is an important step to bring the BSP closer to every Filipino. Traders are running towards bond markets, triggering a sharp surge in yields amid uncertainty brought by U.S. President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs. Sujin Kim has more.
Amid escalating trade tensions and political uncertainty in the United States, investors are dumping both U.S. stocks and treasuries, triggering a sharp surge in yields.
That has hurt the U.S. Because, yeah, right. I guess President Trump didn't realize that the yields of these bonds would go up so high when people were selling. So it's a double whammy.
The question now, can the Philippines stay shielded from the global sell-off?
We are not that insulated or we are not that shielded considering the sensitivity to how the local markets react to the U.S. Treasury yields. But one thing to consider, or at least a positive thing to consider, is our credit spread versus the U.S. actually tightened quite a little bit. But on the local end, it will continue to be directly affected with heightened volatility in U.S. credits, in U.S. treasuries, especially with the upcoming supply.
Well, on one hand, in the past, right, when the U.S. sneezed, we catch a cold, right? So there is still that. We're still coupled to the U.S. to a certain degree. I'm just hoping that because of what's happening, people now will look for other alternatives, and they will see that Asia, specifically Philippines, is a good investment.
In the latest developments, Wall Street futures inched up after the White House announced that smartphones and computers from China will be exempted from the new tariffs. As global uncertainty deepens, foreign investors are taking a wait-and-see approach, parking their funds in short-term instruments while waiting for more favorable conditions.
I guess if I were to give advice to investors is stay on short-term securities for now, for the time being, until the storm passes. There's a method to this madness. At the end of the day, I think generally yields will move lower in the long run. But in the short term, we have to just maybe swallow a bitter pill at this point in time.
If you want to be safe, is gold. And then especially if you're in the Philippines, then the peso is strengthening, so why dollars? You'll have a loss. Stick to your local currencies. So buying Philippine corporate bonds and buying Philippine equities, especially the good dividend-paying ones, are still going to be a good investment.
Francisca says many investors have already reduced equity exposure and are shifting to AAA-rated corporate bonds offering yields of 6 to 6.5%. He advises locking in long tenors while long-term rates remain high before monetary easing begins in the months ahead. Sujin Kim, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
The local auto industry is picking up speed in early 2025, driven by workhorses on the road and a quiet surge in next-gen vehicles. Our mobility correspondent G. Baroga drives through the numbers.
The Philippine auto industry is shifting into high gear, with over 117,000 units sold in the first quarter of 2025. That's a 7% jump from the same time last year, proving the market is still moving despite some speed bumps. According to the Chamber of Automotive Manufacturers and Truck Manufacturers Association, commercial vehicles continue to drive the industry's growth. It accounts for most of first quarter turnover, nearly 93,000 units, a 14% surge. Passenger cars took a detour, falling by the same rate with just over 24,000 sold. One segment quietly buzzing ahead is new energy vehicles or NEVs, now making up 6% of the market, with hybrid electrics taking the lead. Car shows like the Manila International Auto Show are pushing interest forward, showing Pinoys what's new and what's next in mobility. And as always, it's Toyota Motor Philippines, led by Bilyonaryo Alfred T, still leading the pack, capturing nearly half of the market. Even if passenger cars took a pit stop, the industry's engine is still roaring and it's not slowing down anytime soon. For BNC Mobility, G. Baroga.
The number of Filipinos experiencing hunger continues to increase. According to the latest survey of the SWS, the hunger rate has increased to 35.6% this March, from 26.4% in February and 22% in January. The self-rated poverty rate has also risen to 52%, equivalent to 14.4 million families. A survey was conducted from March 15 to 20. We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and narratives that matter most to your bottom line. Trading at the Philippine Stock Exchange opened earlier. Let's look at the initial figures. The main index is in the red, trading at 61.40, down from Monday's close of 61.45. The sub-indices are mixed. Financials, industrial, and holding firms are in the green, while property, services, and mining and oil are in the red. Gainers currently outpacing decliners 64 to 39. So far, value turnover has reached 380.5 million. Meanwhile, in the currency markets, the peso opened stronger at 57.03 to the dollar, appreciating from Monday's close of 57.08. The Philippine Stock Exchange may still reach the 7,800 level by year-end. Wendy Cignal Cruz, research head at Unicapital Securities Incorporated, cites the 13 times price to earnings ratio and anticipated 10% growth in earnings per shares for 2025. But she says global economic uncertainties may affect the outlook. Cruz adds key drivers for the stock market include a further decline in interest rates and the results of the tariff negotiations with the U.S. Philippine Airlines launches its own e-wallet, enabling passengers to store multiple e-cards into a single account. Justin Warby, PAL Vice President for Sales and Distribution, says this highlights their efforts to upgrade the passenger's digital experience. He notes the e-wallet's user-friendly feature benefits travelers who prefer paperless transaction and real-time updates in one click. It is also an alternative payment method for purchasing PAL tickets and ancillaries, as well as other currency conversions. The Armed Forces of the Philippines welcomes the inclusion of the West Philippine Sea on Google Maps. AFP spokesperson Colonel Francel Margaret Padilla said this affirms international recognition of the country's sovereign rights, as upheld by the 2016 arbitral ruling under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Padilla also said AFP sees this as a valuable contribution to truthful representation and public awareness. While it was not known immediately when Google Maps entered WPS on its records or database, the body of water was officially named West Philippine Sea during the term of late President Benigno Aquino III in 2012. The family of steel magnate Anton K denies allegations that he was involved in pogo operations. This comes after reports saying that the suspect's objective behind the killing was not kidnap for ransom, but revenge over a failed pogo deal. The businessman's lawyer says the steel magnate has no shady dealings and only interacted with his most trusted associates. The PNP previously said the pogo involvement is one of the angles they're looking at in this case. But former Center PNP Chief Panfilo Lacson says the police must be careful in sharing updates regarding kidnapping cases. We're taking a quick break. Business 360 will be right back. The Trump administration announced Monday that it would freeze more than $2 billion worth in multi-year grants at Harvard University. This after the school said it would not follow policy demands from the administration. Harvard President Alan Garber said in a statement that the university will not surrender its independence or its constitutional rights. He added that no government should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study they can pursue. The Trump administration has threatened colleges across the U.S. with funding cuts if changes in school policy weren't made. U.S. President Donald Trump plans to impose tariffs on imported pharmaceuticals in the not-too-distant future. The Trump administration is proceeding with probes into imports of pharmaceuticals. Trump is using Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act as justification for so-called sectoral tariffs. It also aims to boost domestic production of goods, which he says are critical to national security.
We don't make our own drugs, our own pharmaceuticals. We don't make our own drugs anymore. The drug companies are in Ireland and they're in lots of other places, China. And all they have to do is impose a tariff. The more, the faster they move in. The higher the tariff, it's very simple. It's inversely proportional. The higher the tariff, the faster they come.
Vietnam tells firms to tighten controls on the origins of goods and materials. This as the country tries to avoid being hit with a 46% tariff rate by the Trump administration. Companies have also been told to diversify their sources of materials and avoid relying on a single country. The call to ensure correct origin of goods comes after Washington raised concerns about Chinese goods being sent to America with Made in Vietnam labels. The Vietnamese government said it has agreed to start talks with the U.S. government for a trade agreement after Washington announced a 90-day pause on its global reciprocal tariffs. Pop star Katy Perry and 5 other women floated in space on the Blue Origin rocket and successfully returned on Earth on Monday. This makes them the first all-female space flight in more than 60 years. The crew lifted off from West Texas and traveled to the edge of space, where they experienced weightlessness before returning to Earth. The flight lasted around 11 minutes, according to a live broadcast by Blue Origin, the space company founded by billionaire Jeff Bezos. Blue Origin does not disclose the average cost of a seat on one of its rockets, but on its website, the company says potential passengers have to pay $150,000 in the form of a refundable deposit to start the order process. And that's it for Business 360. I'm Gerg Cahiles. Thank you for joining us. Keep it here on the BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.